I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. I'm an artist and sculptor, and I like saving money where I can. This was a way that I found I could make a turntable, a heavy-duty turntable.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
For bigger, heavier sculptures. And stick around to the end, I'll show you this big sculpture, what it is that is on the turntable currently. So this whole table is built around this car hub assembly. And I found one at a thrift store for $5, and I could feel that it had some ball bearings and some places that I could attach it to other materials, and so I grabbed it. And that's what this whole table is going to be built around. I've found them for under $50 online. I'll put some Amazon links in the description if you're interested, or you can just search car hub bearing assembly and it should show up. And if you can find these, it's a really secure ball bearing system. So when I originally got this part, it didn't have all the nuts and bolts that went with it. So I went to my local hardware store. I brought the part with me so that I could test and make sure that all of the threads fit and I got the right size. And I just got 4 bolts on one side and 5 of the nuts on the other side. And then I grabbed a bunch of washers. I don't have a lot of money for materials, so most of these materials I already had and I was just repurposing them. But if you have to purchase materials, I used several sections of thick plywood. I used a little bit of thinner plywood. For tools, I had an electric drill with a large drill bit, large enough to drill the size of those bolts that I purchased. Some nails, some wood glue, and then for the sturdy table itself, I used 2x4s, 4x4s, but you could use all 2x4s, and I used some construction nails, though I would recommend using construction screws. So this first section of wood with the black on top, I was testing out some white sand mixed with black charcoal for a possible countertop idea. This was a scrap piece that I used for that. I decided to use it for this tabletop, though you could just use plywood. So here I'm cutting it square, then I'm going to measure corner to corner to get the center of the piece of wood. And then once I've got that center point, what I did is I just eyeballed it and tried to place that hub assembly directly in the center and then circle out where I needed to drill a hole for each of those. Though maybe an easier way to do it would just be to take a piece of cardboard and then press down with the hub assembly on the cardboard, and then you get those marks, and then you can drill right through the cardboard. Once I have where those holes need to be marked out, then I take my drill bit and drill through each of those holes. And a vacuum to clean up. Then I checked it. I noticed that some of the holes weren't perfect, and for it to fit through, I had to widen those just a little bit. And then there was a middle piece that was getting in the way, so I drew out where that middle piece was. I drilled a hole to get me started, and then I used a jigsaw to cut a hole. And that made space so that I could fit the hub assembly inside. Then I tightened everything in place, and there we have what will be the top piece of the table. And then we're going to do the same process for the piece of wood that's going to be directly under the hub assembly, measuring out where the holes need to be for each of those bolts. Again, a template might be easier than what I did. If you have a better way to find out exactly where these holes are, comment below. This is just how I happen to do it, kind of figuring it out as I was going along. Then I'm going to cut out again a hole that will allow the middle part of the hub assembly to fit snug inside that hole, and I use a file to clean that up a little bit. Now I can drill the other 4 holes on this side. Some hub assemblies only have 3 holes, some have 4. I like the ones with 4 holes just because it gives you more locations to secure it in place. Then I can put the washers on and the bolts and then tighten those in place to make sure that everything fits together. What I'm doing here is I'm just adding another piece of wood, a thinner piece of plywood. This one's only like a 1/2 inch plywood. Adding some wood glue. And I'm just attaching that and then nailing it down. And then these nails were too long, so I bent them over on the other side. And then I re-drilled the holes where the bolts need to go through. And this kind of closed off that area so there's not a giant hole in that bottom section. Now what I'm going to do is make some spacers. So if you're doing this, you can use sections of plywood. I had some sections of scrap wood, and so I cut those to length, and I used wood glue to secure everything. Drilled some holes and then screwed those in place, as well as some additional sections in the middle. This is really just to give stability to that bottom piece. Some of this might be overkill, but this is just what I did. and I try to clean everything up and then flip it around. And so now we have a tabletop with a hole in the middle and a bunch of bolts sticking out of the top. And so I wanted to make kind of a cover plate or a cover so that we have a nice flat tabletop. And to do this, I again marked where the bolts and nuts were, and then I put a little bit of tape on the bottom of my drill to drill not all the way through the board, but most of the way through, just enough to cover those bolts. I used a hammer and chisel to clean things up and to widen those holes a little bit. But ideally, if you have a drill press where you can just drill and then a larger drill bit, that would work much better and be much cleaner than what I did. To show you guys how I put this together on the bigger table, I'm gonna take it apart. Took a while to take the whole thing apart, then put it back together. So if you appreciate me walking you through how I made this, then like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep going. So at the beginning you saw that I could sit on this table, and so it's really strong. It doesn't even feel like I'm giving the joint a lot of strain or stress, and I'm 190 pounds, so it deals with that stress pretty well. Now you might notice that this tabletop looks a little bit different. So what I did with the top of it, that was that black part before, is I sanded down the top. That's why it looks more gray. And then I cut off the edges just because I thought it looked a little bit better. And then the piece directly underneath it, I also stained that with some wood stain and polyurethane just to seal things up and help it to last longer. Now to show you how I attached this to the table, to that secure table that I built, I'll turn the table upside down, and here you can see 4 places where I had some bolts that I fed through and then bolted that bottom piece of plywood into the sturdy table that I'd built. And these bolts, I just happen to have them. You could also just screw it into place with some construction screws and then unscrew it if you want to ever move it onto another table. When you're hammering bolts, it helps to put the nut on top, just at the same level as the bottom of the bolt. And that way, when you hammer, you don't smash the bottom of the bolt, because if you do smash it, sometimes you're not able to get the nut back on top of the bolt. And so that was just a helpful tip that I saw on a video somewhere, and I'll pass it on. And then for the sturdy table itself, it's easier to see how I assembled it when it's upside down. So here you can see that there's basically a box of 2x4s, 2 longer pieces, 2 shorter pieces, and I glued and nailed that box of 2x4s together. Then inside each of those corners, I placed a 4x4 and nailed and glued those in place. Then I turned the whole thing right side up and put 2x4s across the top of it, glued and nailed those in place. And then to make sure that the 4x4s stayed in place at the bottom, that they weren't twisting or moving around, I put 2 sections of 2x4s on either side, and then in between, I put a section of 1x12 wood, a section of thinner wood, but if you have plywood, you can use plywood for that. And this helps to secure it in place, but it also gives me a place to put tools or, trash can or platform for storage. Oh man, it's windy outside and the wind is blowing the smoke into my eyes. Gosh, from this fire that I'm doing in the barn. I thought the fire was a good idea. Now I'm like dying. My eyes are burning. Holy moly. Well, it was really cold. Now I'm warm, but I'm smoked out. Okay. Whew. And then on the bottom of this platform, you can do wheels if you want the table to be mobile. Just make sure that if you're getting wheels for it, that those wheels are going to be able to hold whatever weight you're going to put onto this sculpture stand. I like bolting this in place because if I need to remove the turntable, sometimes you don't want the sculpture to be turning around really easy. In fact, if you want a turntable that's even simpler, even cheaper, you could just take a piece of plywood, cut a hole in the middle, then nail that hole down to the bottom of the table. And then with the piece that has a hole in it, nail another piece of wood on top of that. And then you can set that on top, and having the round piece secured to the bottom foundation and then a hole with the upper piece, you're then able to turn it, but it doesn't turn in a way that's very easy. It's got some friction holding it in place, which is often exactly what you want for a sculpting table, especially if it's in stone. If I build one of those, I'll try to do another video showing you what I mean. Hopefully you understand by the explanation. If you're hammering or chiseling, you don't want something that as soon as you hit it, it starts to turn in place. And this table is very easy to turn. You can see when I'm spinning around on top, there's not a lot of friction. But this one's nice if you need something that turns smoothly. A lot of the times if I'm doing photo shoots of a sculpture, I like it to be able to turn really easy. So this is good for that. All right, I said I'd show you what the big sculpture that was on this was. So here's a look at that. It is a larger-than-life Charlie Kirk sculpture. I started that sculpture the day of his assassination, and it was the largest sculpture that I'd ever done up to this point, and so I had to build this table just for that project. I really enjoy building things. I think building is a big part of being an artist, being a creative person, and it's a big part of saving money a lot of the time. If you're interested in stone sculpting, there's a stone sculpting course that's available now with new lessons being released each week until all of those are uploaded. Once the lessons are uploaded, you have permanent access to them so you can follow along at your pace. There's also a figure sculpting fundamentals course, a portrait sculpting course, and a hand sculpting course, and links to all of those are in the description below. And if you message me on Instagram at AndrewJosephKeith15, let me know that you want a discount code. I'll give you a discount code that works for any of my e-products, including my ebooks and Artist X-Ray Vision. All right, thanks for watching. Stay creative, stay productive, and hopefully I'll see you again in another video.